Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Define Disaster. This is Battlefield 1, and today we're going to be talking about this freshly announced game. We're going to be talking about my thoughts regarding it, and we're going to be looking a little bit at the information available and what this means for the Battlefield series in future. Now, if you're looking for a kind of frame-by-frame trailer breakdown, you've come to the wrong place, because that's not what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be talking about what the game has to offer and what kind of they've done to bring Battlefield to this World War I setting. However, there are a number of YouTubers who have put out capable trailer analyses, and I will be linking one down below from Level Cap Gaming, who did a very good video on the trailer and information available. He kind of gives you all you can basically know about Battlefield 1 and what it's going to look like from a gaming perspective. Here, however, today we're going to be talking about kind of my opinions on it and kind of how they've taken this setting and made it a Battlefield game, because inherently it wouldn't really fit the Battlefield formula. And I had some concerns regarding this game, this setting for Battlefield, once the rumors came out that it may be a Battlefield in World War I. And also when I saw the trailer, I was initially a little bit concerned. And amongst those concerns were that the game would be too heavily based on trench warfare and rifle warfare, because that's basically what World War I was focused on. There was a lot of trench warfare, not a lot of kind of mobile infantry, fast-paced, close-quarter action like we like it and have known to love it from Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4, previous Battlefield titles. Also, of course, as mentioned, the limit on the weapon variety available in that time period. Most people use rifles. And last but not least, difficulties putting all of our kind of classes and game mechanics into this World War I setting. Things like battle pickups, for example, and all the other stuff. I felt that it may be difficult to take this into a setting so far back in time. However, most of my concerns have been eradicated by the information supplied by the DICE team regarding this brand new installment in the Battlefield franchise. The design philosophy that the developers at DICE have clearly gone for here is not historical accuracy, but historical realism. Now, what this means is the game is set in a realistic time period. The locations are realistic, the guns, weapons, and vehicles all existed and were available at that time, yet not necessarily used to the same degree that DICE may be portraying it. So, although there were SMGs and LMGs available in this time period, they weren't used as frequently as we probably will be seeing them used on the battlefield in Battlefield 1. Is this necessarily a bad thing? No, not at all. It's vital that they do this because it allows them to keep the classic Battlefield feel, the classic Battlefield formula alive while putting us in a completely different time period. Now, with the generals being covered, I want to move on to some little bit more specific information. Now, first and foremost, I want to talk about tanks, so vehicle warfare and air combat, both of course available in the new Battlefield game. It wouldn't be a Battlefield game without airplanes and tanks, and they've made some key changes here, probably some of the most profound changes other than of course the setting itself for the Battlefield franchise. First and foremost, they made clear that tanks were no longer equal to tanks. There's not going to be one tank design and 3 different, 4 different, 5 different tank skins as there is in previous Battlefield games. If you remember, in Battlefield 4, the Chinese tank, the Russian tank, and the American tank may have all looked differently, but they functioned identical. There was no statistical difference between these tanks. This is to change in Battlefield 1. The different tanks available in the game, of which there should be multiple, both from a fraction perspective and class perspective. That is to say, there will be heavier tanks, lighter tanks, maybe even some tank destroyers, although if I'm not mistaken, they may have not existed quite yet at that time. There's going to be a lot of variety here. You're going to have to know what the weak points are of your enemy tanks and how they function. A tank battle isn't going to be even. A tank battle is often going to involve you playing to your strengths and playing to your enemy's faults. So this should make tank battles a lot more interesting, a lot less mathematical calculation, a lot more skilled, if you will, and of course a lot more exciting. Now, to add on to that, they also mentioned that you're going to be able to pretty much fit your entire squad into a tank, and I find that idea absolutely thrilling. It's going to basically mean you're going to have a lot more teamwork coming around for tank warfare, something I am extremely excited about. What better than actually having 2 main gunners on your tank, which of course with some of the tanks we've seen in the trailer is almost going to have to be necessary, given that they of course have 2 main turrets on the sides of their tanks. Now, moving on to air vehicles, we only saw this epic air combat, air-to-air combat in the trailer with the biplanes. Now, that doesn't mean we're not going to have other air combat as well, as a number of YouTubers that were at the event and got a little bit more information than us in the general public were quick to point out there is going to be bombers in the game as well. So you're going to have your classical bombers and dogfighting specialists in air combat as well. But something interesting we were able to pick up from the trailer was that you actually seem to have two-seater biplane aircraft, which means you're going to have somebody who's actually exclusively gunning while the other actually flies the plane. Something I have been hoping for a very long time for Battlefield, because I always found it a little bit sad that the jet pilots really were a one-man thing, solo. You never went two people in the plane. There wasn't any team interaction there, which is great to see finally some team interaction coming also to air combat. Now, that doesn't mean you're not going to be able to lone wolf it. They were keen to point out that while they have increased team play to a new level, at least according to them, they are still making it possible for you to successfully lone wolf and just randomly interact with your teammates around you. So that's good for those of you who don't necessarily always want to play in a big group of friends. Moving on to some other interesting, noteworthy things, they seem to have put the flamethrower in the game, and I'm kind of speculating, and this truly is purely speculation, that this may be one of the first battle pickups that we are going to be able to use, because I can't imagine flamethrowers being an actual kind of primary weapon equipable. While they were common in World War I, to say, to over-exaggerate a little bit, they were definitely available. I can imagine this working much better as a battle pickup. This also kind of brings me on to battle pickup vehicles, if you will. They showed a few vehicles that likely aren't going to be, you know, available every round for every team, but one per map, possibly maybe two per map, because of course they are extremely strong. And some of those vehicles are the airships or zeppelins, depending on, of course, if you're the German faction or not, and also armored trains. Very exciting things, possibly to be integrated in the map by, for example, capturing a certain capture point and then getting access to those specific vehicles. Now, very interesting about the train in specific is that they had quite varied roles in World War I. Some of them carried anti-air guns, others carried anti-tank guns or artillery that could be fired at enemy positions, very heavy artillery, comparable if not bigger than to those found on battleships, which we will be getting into in just a moment. So I can see a certain degree of flexibility, customizability there, which is going to be very nice to have, you know, adapt this special weapon to the situation you have. If you have a lot of problems with air combat, the enemy team is dominating with air combat, bring in that armored train with a bunch of AA guns on it and just rip through the enemy defense. Are you having difficulties advancing onto an enemy position? Get out the heavy artillery and bombard their position from there. Lots of strategic and very interesting possibilities likely available through the additions of these vehicles. The Zeppelin for me is pretty much going to be probably a replacement to the C-130 available in Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4, and the armored train I've explained already, probably going to be somewhere down the lines of a missile truck, just probably a little bit more involved than in Battlefield 4. Now, we've also got battleships. Likely I can see maybe one or two of those being available on the larger Conquest large size maps to either teams. Apparently these are massive things, and we saw them in the trailer, completely player controlled, with a lot of probably spots for many players to kind of interact with each other. You probably have somebody driving the ship while you have multiple people manning the different turrets, the smaller turrets, the anti-air turrets, and of course the heavy artillery turrets. There seems to be plenty of opportunity here for a great amount of teamwork, great amount of team interactions, and I can't wait to get my hands on these kind of vehicles and see how they really impact the gameplay, because weapons like these are going to obviously have heavy impact on the game, and that's what I think Battlefield really has been lacking. A lot of the Conquest Large game modes have plenty of vehicles in them, but often they're not really influential enough. There's no kind of mammoth vehicles that make such a heavy impact on the game, and actually destroying them will change the way the game ends out. So if you destroy your enemy battleship yet you can keep yours alive, you probably have won a naval engagement for that round, and that can kind of add another layer of tactics and dynamics to the game. Do you go for a capture point? Do you go and try to eliminate a key enemy asset? And that sounds very exciting, at least to me. Moving away a little bit from the vehicles onto gun mechanics, I was very worried that we would only have rifles in the game pretty much from a historical realism perspective. That would have been more accurate, but they've made very clear that we're going to have things like SMGs, LMGs, shotguns, rifles, pistols, the lots of weapons that you would expect. We may not quite have the railgun from the Final Stand DLC in Battlefield 4, but otherwise your usual weapon class sniper rifles, they should probably all be there because they did exist, the first versions of them, back in the day. They just weren't common, and they're taking a little bit of historical liberties here, which should make the gameplay all the more feel like a traditional Battlefield game, all the more entertaining, while maintaining a little bit of historical realism and immersion, which of course is vital for Battlefield games. It's something they covered a lot in their announcement trailer. They were very keen on keeping realism and immersion as part of their Battlefield series. Now, there's only a few more things I want to talk about here. One, of course, is the maps. Worried a lot that it will be only trench warfare. That was pretty much destroyed by the trailer. They said, yes, we do have trench warfare, and that's going to be exciting and cool, and it probably is, but we're also going to have a lot of varied combat areas, combat maps, temperate zones, climates, and just to name a few, they managed to show off about 4 or 5 alone in this quick kind of 1-minute trailer. They had a desert in there, they had a jungle, they had urban warfare in there, they had trench warfare, they had Alps, so the Italian Alps, which was the mountain warfare that they had in the trailer. So plenty of different scenes, theaters of war to be explored in this new game, which makes me very happy. It's one of the things that made Battlefield 4 so cool. They had all these different kind of areas you could fight in. They had the city landscape, they had the kind of open terrain and things like Goma Railway. They had a lot of urban. They also had a few desert maps, a few jungle maps. There was certainly quite a lot of variety in the game from map design, and they seem to have maintained that philosophy going into Battlefield 1. Now, last but not least is something that they mentioned on the side and gets me really excited, but I'm not quite sure if I'm understanding it correctly. They didn't elaborate on it very much, and that was dynamic environments. This was also kind of listed in one of the description of the products on the kind of EA site, Xbox One site, where you can pre-order the game for a bunch of money already. And they mentioned that destruction environments, destruction was of course part of the game, but dynamic environments was something. Now, they haven't explained exactly what this is, if this is weather, if this is an altering, changing map to do maybe with the gas grenades or the artillery that is in the game, which we don't know yet how exactly is going to function. But it definitely makes something, or sounds very interesting, and could bring Battlefield to a new level, and will certainly make everything a little bit more varied and interesting. However, with all those things being covered, I am really excited to know what you think about this new Battlefield. Please leave your comments down below in the comment section. Tell me what your concerns are, or if you're pretty much just excited about the new Battlefield. You think it's going to be awesome like me, and you're not really worried about anything too much. Personally, the only thing I'm still really worried about a little bit is the inclusion of the cavalry charge, kind of horse combat, and how that's going to really work in the game, given that we've got tanks and guns. I can't quite see that being too successful, but I'm happy to be proven wrong. At least leave me your opinion down below in the comments, and if you want to keep ahead of all Battlefield 1 news, and of course get Battlefield 1 combat and gameplay as soon as the betas release, as soon as the game comes out, feel free to subscribe to this channel to stay ahead of the curve. But with that being said, I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you in the next Battlefield video.